My mother waited until the roast cooled to say it. I'd never be as good as my sister. At 40, still in scrubs from a 12-hour ICU shift, I felt every eye at the table turn away from me and toward Ava, glowing in designer silk. They thought I was late, tired, invisible. What they didn't know was that the house they sat in, the car outside, even Ava's debt-free future had been kept alive by my paychecks. Tonight I wasn't bringing dessert. I was bringing receipts. Before this dinner ended, the story of who kept this family standing would break apart. I walked into the dining room still wearing my navy scrubs. The smell of disinfectant clinging to my skin like a second layer I couldn't scrub off. The table was already set, candles flickering in polished silver holders, crystal glasses catching the light, plates trimmed in gold leaf. My mother had laid out her best china as if royalty were arriving, though it was only us, and Ava, of course, the chosen one. The smell of roasted chicken and buttery rolls filled the air, homey and luxurious at the same time. For a split second, I thought maybe this dinner would be different, but then I saw the chair left for me, slightly wobbly, tucked at the corner, the one nobody else wanted. Caroline, my mother, was leaning toward Ava with a kind of glowing pride she had never aimed at me. Her voice was sweet, syrupy, every syllable dipped in admiration. "You always had ambition," she said, brushing a strand of Ava's glossy hair back like she was still a child. Landing a position at a startup like this, it proves what we've always known. You're destined for success. My father, David, nodded along like an eager disciple, raising his wineglass. "That company is lucky to have you, sweetheart. They'll be telling stories about this dinner one day." The night we toasted our daughter's rise. His laugh filled the room, hearty and sure of itself. Ava sparkled under their gaze. She wore a silk dress the colour of emeralds, the kind that whispered money with every shift of fabric. Her nails were perfectly manicured, her hair glossy, curled at the ends like a shampoo commercial. She was glowing, drinking in the attention as if it were oxygen, smiling with her teeth just enough to show she knew the room belonged to her. I slid into my seat, careful not to let the chair wobble too much, and folded my napkin into my lap. My stomach growled, but the fatigue in my bones drowned out my hunger. 12 hours in the ICU left me shaky. Yet I was here because family dinners weren't optional. They were rituals, and absence would be interpreted as betrayal. For a moment, conversation swirled around kombucha taps and creative office spaces. Ava described the break room at her new company with the same reverence I used to hear patients speak of answered prayers. She had free sparkling water, bean bags, even Friday happy hours. My father leaned forward, eyes shining like she'd just announced a cure for cancer. I tried to slip in my own story, my own small offering to the table. "Speaking of work," I said, clearing my throat, "a patient came in with full cardiac arrest today. The doctor told me later my quick compressions bought him enough time to survive. He's breathing on his own tonight. For one heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, the room would pause. That maybe they would look at me with the pride they gave so freely to Ava. But Caroline only glanced at me, her face already turned back toward her favoured child. "That's nice, honey," she said, the same tone one uses when complimenting a child for colouring inside the lines. Then her attention snapped back to Ava. "Tell us more about your office. Do they really give everyone stock options? That's so progressive." David chuckled, dismissing my words with a wave of his hand. "Healthcare is steady enough, but there's no real growth, not like marketing. Ava's job has a future." Not like those dead-end hospital shifts. The words cut deeper than they knew. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened, swallowing down the burn in my throat. I had spent my life saving strangers, steadying hearts, keeping families whole. But here, in my own family, I was invisible, a ghost who showed up late and tired, and then it came. Caroline's eyes slid toward me, sharp and cold, her smile turning thin. "Lauren," she said, her voice carrying across the candlelight, "you'll never be as good as your sister. Ava has drive. She's going places. You've settled." The air shifted. Even Ava's smirk, half hidden behind her wineglass, twisted the knife. My chest tightened. The candles flickered in the draught of silence that followed. For a moment I thought I might not breathe. I lowered my gaze to my plate, half empty, the roasted chicken gone cold. The house around us creaked faintly with the winter wind. And I thought of how many checks I'd written to keep its roof steady. How many overtime shifts I had taken to cover payments no one else wanted to talk about. They all thought Ava was the future, but I was the scaffolding. I swallowed the words I wanted to spit across the table. Instead, I smiled faintly, my lips pressed so tight they ached. If they couldn't see it tonight, they would soon, because this house, the very walls around us, was standing because of me, the invisible daughter, and the day was coming when they would be forced to face that truth. The longer I sat at that table, the more the contrasts pressed down on me. Candlelight danced in the crystal, reflecting like stars trapped in glass. The smell of the roast mixed with garlic butter rolls, layered over the perfume Ava wore, a scent that whispered wealth. Every detail screamed celebration. Roses in a vase, trimmed to perfection, the flick of my mother's manicured nails against the rim of her wineglass, the clink of silver forks against porcelain plates. It was a portrait of luxury, of a family honouring their brightest child. Meanwhile, I could still smell the faint trace of antiseptic on my wrists, no matter how hard I had scrubbed at the hospital sink before coming here. My nails were short and bare, my knuckles rough from endless hand-washing. My back ached from hours hunched over patients whose lives balanced on the rhythm of compressions and machines. The contrast was glaring, two worlds colliding in one dining room, and I knew which world mine belonged to. I stared at the glass of wine set in front of me. I hadn't even touched it. My hands were still trembling slightly from adrenaline, the phantom pulse of resuscitation still in my fingers. It struck me then, the irony. They praised Ava for a job with kombucha taps, while I carried the weight of keeping hearts beating. And yet, to them, mine was the lesser path. The words my mother had said echoed in my skull like a siren. "You'll never be as good as your sister." My fork pressed into the chicken, carving grooves I didn't eat. Something inside me tightened, but instead of snapping, I swallowed it down. Because a sharper thought was forming, a question that would change everything. I could see the words in my mind, like a weapon unsheathed. If I'm the failure, then who's been paying for the roof over your heads? But I didn't let it out, not yet, not tonight. The memory of my online banking app flashed across my mind. Every monthly auto transfer, each labelled neatly as family contribution. At first, I believed it went straight toward the mortgage, helping steady the house when interest rates rose. I had agreed to set it on auto pay 2 years ago, thinking it was a temporary safety net. Each deduction stung, but I told myself it was duty, responsibility, the invisible glue that held us together. Invisible, always invisible. I caught Ava laughing as she described the engagement ring she'd flashed on social media last week. Her voice bubbled like champagne as she launched into stories about wedding venues she'd toured, vineyards, lakefront resorts, places where chandeliers glowed like falling constellations. Caroline beamed at her, eyes misty with pride. David already looked ready to sign the check. Then Ethan, her fiancé, cleared his throat. He leaned in, his sleeves rolled neatly, his watch gleaming under the chandelier. "We're actually looking at the numbers carefully," he said, his tone slick, practiced, like he was presenting a pitch deck instead of discussing a wedding. "If we allocate correctly, family support can cover catering and decor. Ava and I can then focus on the honeymoon fund. It's really about optimizing resources." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Family support. That phrase rolled through the air like a verdict. He said it so casually, as if my wallet were already factored into his spreadsheet. As if my life, my overtime, my exhaustion, my scraped knuckles were just another column on his financial plan. Ava nodded along, her face bright with dreams of a perfect ceremony, never questioning where that support would come from. The assumption was obvious, the responsibility automatic. The role of invisible benefactor had already been assigned to me without my consent. A spark lit somewhere deep in my chest. Not anger, not yet, more like the first crack of a fault line before the quake. My mind flicked back to every paycheck drained by autotransfer, every time I told myself I was being dutiful, that family came first. My gaze shifted across the table from Ava's glowing face to my parents' approving nods, then down to my own hands, hands that trembled with the memory of compressions, of carrying strangers back to life, while my own family let me wither in silence. I breathed slowly in through my nose, out through my mouth, the same way I steadied myself before pushing meds into a fragile vein. If I erupted now, they would dismiss me as emotional, dramatic, ungrateful. No. Tonight wasn't the moment, but soon. I pressed my napkin to my lips, hiding the small, humorless smile tugging there. Let them keep drinking, keep planning their catered future. Let Ethan keep talking like I was a line item in his budget. Because what they didn't know was that I had been keeping my own ledger. Bank statements, transfers, receipts, cold evidence waiting in a folder at home. If tonight was their performance of celebration, then soon I would stage mine, a reckoning. And when it came, they would see the truth carved into paper, undeniable, black and white. The house they toasted in, the life they celebrated, was built on the shoulders of the daughter they claimed was never enough. Not tonight, but the storm was already gathering. The night after that dinner, I sat alone in my apartment, still in my scrubs, scrolling through my phone. My thumb froze when I saw the first picture. Ava was standing on a beach, her hair lifted by the ocean breeze, a cocktail in her hand with a ridiculous umbrella sticking out. Behind her, my parents were laughing, both of them in matching floral shirts, holding drinks of their own. The caption read, "Family time in Hawaii, nothing better." I stared at it until the glow of the screen blurred my vision. No one had told me there was a trip, no invitation, not even a text asking if my schedule allowed. The ocean shimmered behind them like a cruel joke. Blue skies and palm trees, while I had been stuck under fluorescent lights, working another double shift. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the album. Ava in a sun hat, Caroline holding her hand across a dinner table set with seafood towers. David smiling under a straw hat, Ethan's arm slung casually around Ava. Each photo was a punch. I called my mother, my voice cracking as I asked why. "Oh, Lauren," she said, almost sighing, "we didn't think you could get time off work. You're always so busy at the hospital. It was kind of last minute. Ava needed a break after starting her new job. You understand? I hung up before the tears came. Hours later, a text from Ava arrived. Sorry you didn't know about Hawaii. You're always working, so we figured you wouldn't want to come. Hope you're not mad. Not mad. Devastated. The memory of it still burned weeks later when I walked into Ava's 26th birthday party. The venue was the most expensive restaurant in town, the kind of place where appetizers cost more than my entire grocery bill. My parents had rented out the back room, filled with 50 guests. The lights shimmered off crystal chandeliers, champagne flowed freely, and Ava glowed again, the star of a stage I had never been invited onto. When Mrs. Chen, one of Caroline's friends, turned to me and asked politely what I did for work, I opened my mouth. Before I could finish, David's laugh cut me down. Oh, Lauren's still figuring things out. She's working at the hospital, but Ava, she's the one with a real career. She's going places. The humiliation seared me. I had just finished another 14-hour shift, holding people's lives in my hands, making decisions in seconds that meant survival or death. Yet, to them, I was still figuring things out. Caroline raised her glass, her voice cutting through the chatter. We're so proud of our Ava. She's always shown such natural talent. Some people are just born to succeed. Everyone clapped. I sat 3 feet away, invisible, my chest hollowed out. That night, back at the hospital, I leaned against a counter in the ICU, trying to breathe through the ache. A patient I had resuscitated earlier that week waved weakly from his bed. "You're my miracle worker," he whispered, his voice raspy but sure. The words cracked something inside me, an upward swing in the sin wave of my emotions. Someone saw me, not for Ava's glow, not for my parents' narrative. For what I actually did. Later that week, during a rare, quiet hour, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. Bills and receipts spread around me like debris. I logged into my online banking app, staring at the steady stream of transfers. Every month, the same deduction. $12,800. Label: family contribution, discretionary, discretionary. The word made me laugh bitterly. I had thought it was mortgage support, a concrete obligation, but discretionary meant flexible. It meant my parents had the power to redirect it anywhere they pleased. I traced each transaction, my finger moving down the screen. The sums lined up perfectly with their bills, their expenses, Ava's so-called breaks. It wasn't just about keeping the roof steady anymore. My exhaustion had become their playground, my invisibility, their leverage. The antiseptic smell still lingered faintly on my hands from the day's shift. I pressed my palms flat against the cool surface of the table, steadying myself. I wasn't ready to confront them yet, but the pattern was undeniable. While Ava basked in sunsets and champagne toasts, my hours, my body, my breath were being translated into her lifestyle, and somewhere in that realization, a different kind of clarity rose. I wasn't just overlooked, I was being used. Jennifer Park was the kind of nurse who never sugarcoated anything. Mid-50s, sharp eyes behind reading glasses, a streak of silver in her black hair. She'd been my charge nurse since I started, and she had a way of seeing through excuses, even the ones you told yourself. We were on break, sitting in the staff lounge, when she noticed me scrolling through bank statements on my phone. My hands were shaking, the screen lit with numbers I couldn't ignore anymore. "You've been quiet all week," she said, sipping her coffee. "What's going on, Lauren?" I hesitated, but then the words tumbled out. The Hawaii trip, the birthday humiliation, the auto transfers labelled discretionary. I expected her to tell me I was overreacting, that family obligations were just part of adulthood. but Jennifer didn't flinch. "This isn't family support," she said flatly, setting her mug down. "This is financial abuse." The phrase hit me like a jolt of cold water. I blinked, the words echoing in my head. Financial abuse. I had never thought to call it that. "Show me," she said. I handed her my phone, and together we pulled up my online banking and credit reports. Jennifer grabbed a notepad from the counter. "Let's map this out." We started with the mortgage, $2,800 monthly. Then came Caroline's car note, a steady $400 pulled every month. Next, Ava's student loans, statements showing payments I hadn't realised were mine. Then Jennifer spotted something uglier. "Hold up," she said, pointing at one line. "Credit card. Funding $200 payment. Account ending in 4489. Do you have a card ending like that?" I shook my head. Jennifer scrolled back through. The payment hadn't come directly from me. It had been funneled. Money transferred from my account into the family account, then redirected to cover a credit card under Ava's and Ethan's names. A bridge payment. My labour washed through the family account, disguised as collective responsibility, then applied to their luxuries. My stomach clenched. I thought of Ethan at that dinner, talking about optimising resources. My resources. Jennifer kept writing, her pen scratching across the page. Mortgage 2,800 mo. Car note to Caroline 400 dansume. Ava's loans 650 mo. MISC credit cards. Variable, bridged from Lauren's transfers. "That's almost half your income," she said, eyes narrowing. "No wonder you're running double shifts. You're not supporting a household. You're underwriting a lifestyle." The words made me dizzy. Then Jennifer asked me to check my credit report. Reluctantly, I logged in. My jaw tightened as I scrolled. There it was. A credit card I'd never opened, under my name as an authorised user. The account belonged to Caroline, but I was attached. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. Jennifer adjusted her glasses, leaning closer. "They added you to boost their credit limit, maybe even their score. Perfectly legal if you gave verbal permission once, or if they implied it was a formality. But look here." She tapped the screen. "Any missed payment on this account? It hits your credit too. That's not just unfair, it's dangerous." I gripped the phone tighter. Authorised user. I tried to remember if Caroline had mentioned it in passing, maybe buried in some phone call. Something about helping the family's credit look better. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now the reality sat in front of me. If they defaulted, I carried the stain. My clean record jeopardised. My ability to qualify for housing in the new city at risk. Sin wave crashing down. I pressed my palms against my face, my breath shaky. "So, I've been paying bills I didn't know about, attached to credit I never agreed to, and they're calling me the failure." Jennifer's voice softened, but it was steel underneath. "Lauren, listen to me. They're exploiting your sense of duty. You're not failing. You're the one propping everyone else up. But if you don't set boundaries, they'll keep draining you until there's nothing left." The antiseptic smell still clung to my sleeves, the ghost of the ICU following me even here. I thought about the patients who flatlined and how quickly the monitor screamed when the heart gave out. Looking at the numbers on Jennifer's notepad, I felt like my life was the patient. My family was pressing down on my chest, stealing each beat, each breath, until I had nothing left to give. Jennifer pushed the paper toward me. "This isn't just money, Lauren. This is your life. And you need to decide how much of it you're willing to lose." The next Saturday morning, I turned my apartment into a war room. Bank statements spilled across the kitchen table, manila folders stacked like barricades. I printed everything, every transfer, every receipt from the last 2 years. The hum of the printer was relentless, spitting out evidence, line after line. I spread the pages into neat piles: mortgage, loans, car notes, credit cards. I highlighted dates, circled amounts, drew arrows connecting transfers from my account into the family account, and from there into Ava's balances or Caroline's card. 2 years of my life reduced to ink on paper, a map of how I had been siphoned dry. Hours passed, my coffee went cold, but the longer I worked, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just sloppy accounting, it was systemic. Every time Ava needed a cushion, every time Caroline splurged, the bridge was me. My paychecks were the spine of a budget no one had asked me to join. Halfway through the stack, I found something that made my breath catch. It was a letter, thin paper, folded and refolded, tucked inside a folder labelled Refinance 2021. The header was from the bank. I unfolded it carefully, smoothing it across the table. It was an acknowledgement letter. My name was there, printed in black ink. It stated that I had contributed toward the down payment during the refinancing process, a small but crucial amount that had helped secure a better interest rate. But the deed itself? My name wasn't there. Caroline and David's names were. They had taken my contribution, used it to steady the house, but ensured I had no claim to it. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. I could still hear my mother's voice from that dinner sneering, "You'll never be as good as your sister." And yet, here was proof. Without me, they might not even have the roof above their heads. For a moment, anger gave way to clarity. I wasn't powerless. They had left a paper trail, and the paper didn't lie. Then my phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. I pressed play, and the voice of a man from the bank filled my apartment. "Hello, this is Mr. Gordon from Wells and Finch. I just wanted to confirm our earlier conversation with Mr. Hale regarding the mortgage. As we discussed, his eldest daughter, Lauren, has been handling the monthly contributions and intends to continue as part of the arrangement. If there are any issues with autopay, please contact us immediately." My stomach lurched. They had told the bank I was the payer, not just a helper, not a temporary contributor, the payer. I was, in their narrative, a permanent fixture of the mortgage plan. A ghost co-signer without the title. I replayed the voicemail 3 times, the words hitting harder each time. Eldest daughter intends to continue. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. I had become a silent guarantor, not legally perhaps, but functionally. My family had folded me into their financial story so deeply that outsiders saw me as the responsible party. I pressed my palms against the table, staring at the piles of evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something besides exhaustion, control. The truth was finally visible, mapped out across the wood grain of my kitchen. I grabbed a fresh notebook and began drafting. A timeline of payments, a chart of monthly contributions, quotes from the acknowledgement letter. The voicemail transcribed word for word. Each page I filled tightened the knot of resolve inside me. For years I had swallowed their dismissals, endured their indifference, but now I held something they couldn't dismiss. Evidence. Proof that while Ava was held up as the shining star, it was my overtime, my body, my life that kept this family afloat. I sat back, looking at the stacks of paper, the highlighted lines glowing under the lamp. It wasn't victory yet, but it was something close. A foothold on a cliff I thought I'd been dangling from alone. The sin curve of my life ticked upward. For once, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. A week after the long Saturday spent with receipts and highlighters, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Thick paper, embossed with the crest of the state university. My hands trembled as I slid a finger under the seal. "Dear Ms. Hale," it read, "we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance into the nurse practitioner program." I sank into the couch, the letter spread across my lap. My heart hammered, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. Along with the letter came an email from a teaching hospital in another city. They wanted to offer me a position as an NP once I completed the program. The salary was 6 figures, stability, a new life waiting. I exhaled slowly, the sound shaky in the silence of my apartment. For years I'd been working overtime just to stand still. Now a door was opening, but stepping through it meant something else too. It meant leaving behind the role I had been trapped in, the role my family had written for me without my consent. That night I called Ava. I didn't want her blindsided later. She answered with a cheerful lilt, clearly distracted. "Hey, Lauren, what's up? Can we make it quick? Ethan and I are tasting wedding cakes." I swallowed, pressing the letter against my knee. "Ava, I need to tell you something. The student loans you think Mom and Dad paid off. They didn't. It was me. Every transfer, every payment, it came out of my account." There was a long pause, then a laugh, soft and incredulous. "What? No, that can't be right. Mum said—" "Mum lied," I cut in, my voice steady. "I've got the receipts, Ava. 2 years' worth. You've been debt-free because I've been working nights and weekends. You're walking into your future on the hours I lost." Her breath caught, but instead of outrage, her tone shifted into something uncertain. "Lauren, I don't know what to say. Are you sure? Maybe you're mistaken." I closed my eyes. She sounded like she wanted to believe me, but the story she'd been fed all her life was stronger than my words. "Check the bank memos. Look at the statements. The money didn't come from thin air." Silence stretched, heavy. Finally, she murmured, "Ethan says family support is supposed to be shared. Maybe that's what this is." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Family support isn't one person draining herself while everyone else drinks Mai Tais in Hawaii. You need to think hard about who's actually supporting who. She promised to look into it, her voice thin, brittle around the edges. When the call ended, I sat staring at the wall, realizing Ava might never truly see the truth until it hit her in the face. That realization only hardened my resolve. The next morning, I logged into my bank app and went straight to the auto-pay settings. My finger hovered over the toggle switch. The deduction had been there for so long it felt like gravity, inevitable, inescapable. I clicked it off. The silence that followed felt louder than any ICU alarm. In that moment, I knew what I had done. I'd stopped being their silent oxygen tank. The clock was ticking now. When the bank didn't get its next payment, when my parents realized the stream had dried up, they would come looking. And when they did, I'd be ready. The evidence was filed in order. The letter of acceptance lay folded neatly on my desk, a promise of escape. I imagined myself in a new apartment, in a new city, where my worth wasn't measured against Ava's shine, but against my own work. But before I left, before I closed the door on this chapter, there had to be a reckoning. A conversation where the truth was laid bare. No more whispers, no more sneers over dinner plates. I picked up my phone again and typed out a message to my mother. "We need to have a family meeting. Saturday. All of us at dinner. There are things we need to discuss." I hit send, my pulse steady. The storm I'd been holding back was about to break. Saturday came, cloaked in the smell of rosemary chicken and candle wax. My mother always believed a heavy meal could soften any blow, but tonight her food was just camouflage. The dining room looked almost identical to the night of Ava's job celebration. The same china, the same flickering light, the same vase of roses cut to the same height. But to me, it felt like a courtroom. David started before I'd even sat down properly. His voice had that booming preacher's cadence he used when he wanted to sound reasonable but really meant to intimidate. Lauren, we need to talk about responsibility. Family doesn't survive without sacrifice. You can't just decide to stop contributing because you're feeling emotional. That's not how this works. I folded my hands in my lap, letting him talk, my pulse steady. Caroline chimed in next, her tone dripping with exasperated sweetness. Ava's at the start of her career. She needs to focus, not worry about debts or bills. You, Lauren, you have a stable job. You've always been good at managing. Surely you understand that her success benefits all of us. Her words stung, not because they were new, but because they were old, worn smooth from repetition. Ava always needed, and I always supplied. Then Ethan leaned forward, his sleeves rolled, his phone already open to some budgeting app. We've been reviewing the wedding costs, he said, as if presenting quarterly earnings. If family covers catering and decor, Ava and I can direct our funds to the honeymoon and investments. It's about allocating resources efficiently. Ava's trajectory is strong. This is the time to back her future. My fork clinked against my plate. Resources, allocation, efficiency. My life reduced to a financial model in Ethan's spreadsheet. I took a slow breath, then reached into my bag. The leather folder landed on the table with a thud that silenced the room. I opened it, fanning out the pages like playing cards, bank statements, loan payment receipts, credit card transactions, arrows, highlights, memos, the map of 2 years' worth of my life. Caroline blinked, confusion flashing into irritation. David frowned, leaning closer. Ava's eyes widened. I tapped one page, my finger steady. Mortgage payments, $20,800 a month. My account, every time. Car note, $400. Student loans, Ava's, $650 monthly. Even emergency credit card payments when spending went too high. All of it? Out of my paycheck. Silence. Only the clock in the hallway ticked, loud as a gavel. David sputtered first. That's not how we see it. We agreed as a family. I cut him off by pulling out my phone, pressing play. The voicemail from Mr. Gordon filled the room. As we discussed, his eldest daughter, Lauren, has been handling the monthly contributions and intends to continue as part of the arrangement. The words hung in the air, undeniable. Ava's hand shot to her mouth. Ethan's expression flickered, calculation breaking through his polished exterior. Caroline's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. I leaned forward, locking eyes with each of them in turn. If the future is Ava, I said, my voice calm and sharp as glass, then let the future pay for your past due. The silence that followed was deeper than any I'd ever heard in that house. Ava stared at the statements in front of her, her face pale. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his pitch deck crumbling to dust. My parents looked cornered, their usual defences stripped away by paper and voicemail. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the one holding the evidence, the one dictating the terms. And I wasn't afraid of their silence anymore. Ava reached across the table, her manicured fingers trembling as she picked up one of the statements. Her eyes darted over the lines, confusion furrowing her brow. This can't be right, she whispered. My name is here, but I thought Mum and Dad... They let you think that, I said, my tone even. Every loan payment with your name on it came from me. I've been the one keeping you debt-free while working myself raw. Her face drained of colour, the wine glass in her hand shaking so badly she set it down before it shattered. Lauren, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. For the first time, her voice carried no smugness, no superiority, only disbelief. She looked at Mom, then at Dad, desperate for reassurance. Neither spoke. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Look, maybe this is just a misunderstanding. What matters now is moving forward. Lauren, are you saying you'll stop supporting after the wedding? Because the expenses are about to get higher. Catering, photography, the venue deposit, family contributions will need to be consistent for at least the next year. I turned my gaze on him, sharp and unflinching. Consistent contributions? From me? No, not anymore. The smooth mask Ethan wore cracked, irritation bleeding through. But that's unrealistic. Ava's career is still in the early stages. You have a stable income. You've been paying this long already. Why change now? Because I'm done being your silent investor, I said, pushing the folder toward him. You're marrying my sister, not my bank account. Ava's eyes widened, flicking to Ethan. Wait, you knew about this? He hesitated, then lifted a shoulder, a practiced shrug. I assumed Lauren understood her role. Every family has one person who carries more weight. That's just how it works. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Ava's hand dropped from the statement, her eyes wet with something I couldn't name. Betrayal, perhaps, but not at me. I straightened, sliding the last page back into the folder. Listen carefully. The transfers stop tonight. I'm moving to another city. I've been accepted into the nurse practitioner program, and I already have an offer waiting. My future is mine. I won't bankroll this family another day. David slammed his palm against the table, silverware rattling. His face flushed red. How dare you, Lauren? We've given you everything, your upbringing, your education, and this is how you repay us, walking away when we need you most? I met his anger with calm steel. You didn't give me everything. I earned every cent that's in these statements. I've paid nearly $50,000 into this family while being told I'm worthless. That debt doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you. Caroline's voice sliced in, trembling but firm. Family is sacrifice. That's what keeps us together. You can't just abandon us, Lauren. I leaned forward, every word deliberate. Family is love, not exploitation. Sacrifice only means something when it's chosen. You demanded mine without asking, and you buried me under the weight of it. That's not love, that's control. The air hung thick. The only sound the steady tick of the grandfather clock. Ava stared at Ethan like she was seeing him for the first time. David fumed silently, fists clenched on the table. Caroline's lips pressed tight, her eyes shining with anger. Or maybe fear. I rose from my chair, folding the folder under my arm. I'm not your safety net anymore. Ava can build her future without my paycheck. If you want to keep this house, pay for it yourselves. If you want to throw a wedding, fund it yourselves. From here on, my life belongs to me. No one moved as I walked away from the table. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. The first missed payment came faster than I expected. A week after that second dinner, I found a voicemail waiting on my phone. This is Wells and Finch Bank calling. We haven't received the mortgage payment due on the 15th. Please contact us immediately to avoid penalties. I listened twice, my thumb hovering over the delete button, my chest tightened. Even though I had chosen this, the guilt coiled in me like a snake. My absence was a hole, and for the first time, my family had to feel the weight of it. Then the messages started. From Mom. Lauren, the bank is calling us. Did you forget to send the payment? Please fix this immediately. We can't afford a late fee. From Dad. This is serious. Don't make me regret trusting you. The family depends on your consistency. From Ava. Hey, Mum's freaking out. I don't know what's happening, but can you please help? Just this once until things calm down? My phone buzzed so often, it felt like a heart monitor in fibrillation, erratic and unrelenting. I sat on my couch staring at the pile of folders on the coffee table. The evidence of what I had already given sat there like a fortress of paper. But the guilt still clawed at me. Am I being cruel? Am I abandoning them? At work, I caught myself distracted, charting vitals while my mind replayed Mom's voice. Family is sacrifice. The phrase rang louder than the monitors. It gnawed at me while I checked IV drips, while I pressed a stethoscope to fragile chests. Finally, on a lunch break, I confessed it all to Jennifer. She listened without interrupting, her eyes narrowing slightly with each new detail. When I finished, my sandwich untouched, she leaned forward. You're not cruel, Lauren. You're detoxing. Detoxing? I repeated, frowning. Exactly. You've been their drug, their steady infusion of money. They've built their stability on your sacrifice. When you cut them off, of course they're crashing. That doesn't mean you should start the drip again. Her words sank in, a weight and a relief at the same time. But they're family, I whispered. What if the house falls apart? What if they can't manage? Jennifer took a slow sip of her coffee before setting the cup down. Family doesn't mean martyrdom. You need boundaries, and I'll give you 3 sentences. Memorize them, use them, write them on your bathroom mirror if you have to. I looked up, waiting. 1, I can help with information, not with money. 2, my budget is not a family emergency plan. 3, I won't finance choices I didn't make. She paused, letting each one sink in. Say those out loud, she said. I hesitated, then repeated them, my voice shaky at first. I can help with information, not with money. My budget is not a family emergency plan. I won't finance choices I didn't make. By the 3rd, my voice was stronger. Jennifer nodded. Good, that's your shield. Every time they come at you with guilt, hold that shield up. It's not cruelty, it's survival. That night, as texts kept pouring in, I sat with the phrases in my head. I typed them into my notes app, reading them over and over until they felt like mine. Mum's messages grew more frantic. We're drowning here, Lauren. Do you really want your sister to suffer? Dad's voice grew sharper. Don't you dare think you're above this family. You're acting selfish. Even Ava sent, Please, I don't know what to do without you. Just one more time, please. I typed responses, then deleted them. I almost caved, almost let myself be reeled back into the net. But Jennifer's words anchored me. I whispered the 3 sentences aloud, alone in my apartment. My voice didn't shake this time, and for the first time since I shut off the autopay, I felt a flicker of peace. The call came late on a Wednesday night, just as I was folding laundry. Lauren, Ava's voice was panicked, almost breaking. Dad's in pain. His chest, he can't breathe right. We're taking him to the ER. Please, please come. My first instinct was pure reflex. I grabbed my keys, my badge, my stethoscope, still hanging from a hook by the door. By the time I reached the hospital, David was already in triage, pale and sweating, clutching his chest as monitors beeped around him. The nurse on duty glanced at me with relief. ICU Hale, right? Family. Yes, I said, stepping to my father's side. My training clicked into place. His vitals were erratic but not catastrophic, unstable angina, maybe a mild heart attack brewing. I pressed his hand down, gently, steadying the IV line. Dad, you're okay, we've got you. For the next few hours, I became two people, the daughter and the nurse. I hovered over the monitors, explained each step to Caroline and Ava, calmed their frantic questions. I translated the doctor's shorthand into words they could grasp. When Dad groaned, I adjusted the pillow, checked the leads, whispered to him like I would to any frightened patient. Caroline clutched my arm once, her nails digging in. Thank God for you, she whispered, tears trembling in her eyes. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe the wall had cracked. But the moment passed. When the cardiologist finished his consult and left, Caroline turned to me, her voice low but sharp. This is why you can't abandon us, Lauren. You see how much we need you. I swallowed, exhaustion crashing into me. I'll always come for emergencies, for health, for life, but not for money. Not anymore. Her face hardened, the softness vanishing like a shadow under bright light. She released my arm, crossing hers over her chest. Family is one thing, Lauren. Bills are another. They don't wait. I looked at her, something in me fracturing and hardening at the same time. Neither does my body when it's collapsing under double shifts. Neither does my heart when you call me a failure. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Later, while David dozed under medication, Ava pulled me aside. Her eyes were red, her voice small. He never told us, but he almost lost his job 2 years ago. They cut his hours and Mum panicked. That's when she asked you for help with the house. Only she never explained it was supposed to be temporary. She just leaned on you, and Dad never stopped her. A strange mix of grief and clarity washed over me. The puzzle pieces clicked. The family contribution wasn't just favoritism. It was survival for them, survival at my expense. I nodded slowly. So he stayed quiet, depended on me without ever saying it out loud. Ava wiped her eyes. He thought if he ignored it, maybe it would feel less like failure. I don't think he ever realized how much he was costing you. I pressed a hand to my chest, breathing deep. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a piece of truth I hadn't had before. When dawn broke, the cardiologist cleared David to stay under observation, not critical but cautious. I stood by the window, watching the sky lighten, and made my choice. I would remain their daughter in the ways that mattered, showing up when lives hung in the balance, steadying hands when fear overwhelmed. But I would not be their lifeline of cash anymore. I could offer compassion without surrendering my autonomy. From that night forward, I promised myself my love would no longer be confused with financial servitude. The sin wave ticked upward again, not soaring but steady. From the hospital window, the sunrise painted the horizon in pale gold. And for the first time in years, I felt a sliver of balance return. It was Aunt Ruth who called me first. Her voice carried the husky rasp of a lifetime of cigarettes and truths too heavy to hold alone. Lauren, she said, come by the house this weekend. There's something you need to know about your mother. Ruth lived in a modest bungalow on the far edge of town, a place where the curtains never matched and the garden always seemed a little wild. When I arrived, she was waiting on the porch, a mug of tea steaming in her hands. She waved me in like she'd been rehearsing this moment for years. We sat at her kitchen table, the smell of chamomile steeping between us. Ruth didn't circle around the subject. She plunged straight in. You think your mother's cruelty comes from strength. she said, her eyes fixed on mine. But it doesn't. It comes from weakness, from wounds she never let heal. I frowned. What do you mean? Ruth leaned back, sighing. Caroline wasn't always the golden one. In our family, she was the invisible child. Our parents favoured me, sent me to college, bought me a car. Caroline got hand-me-downs and silence. She grew up believing the only way to matter was to create her own favourite, and when Ava came along, she poured every ounce of attention into her because she swore she'd never feel that powerless again. Her words sank into me like stones in water. My mother, the woman who had made me feel invisible, had once been invisible herself. She repeated the pattern, Ruth continued softly. Instead of breaking it, she passed it on. That's what happens with wounds like that, Lauren, unless someone stops it. I stared down at the tea swirling in my mug, the surface trembling with the pulse of my heartbeat. So she turned me into what she once was, the backup, the expendable one. Ruth nodded. Exactly. She thought if Ava sparkled, it meant she wasn't powerless anymore, but all she really did was recreate the same cruelty that shaped her. I didn't know whether to feel pity or rage. Maybe both. Then Ruth stood, shuffling to a drawer in the sideboard. She pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age, the paper fragile and curling at the edges. This was from your grandmother, she said, sliding it across the table. It was meant for her first granddaughter. Your mother never gave it to you. I picked it up carefully, the paper soft as tissue under my fingers. Inside was a folded note written in looping cursive. I read aloud. To the first granddaughter who chooses a life of care. Remember this. Respect is worth more than approval. Do not trade your self-worth for someone else's comfort. You are not invisible no matter how they treat you. Your work will outlive their praise. My throat tightened. Tears blurred the words until I had to set the letter down. It wasn't money, it wasn't property, but it was something greater. A reminder that my path wasn't an accident, that someone before me had seen it and blessed it. Ruth touched my hand gently. That's your inheritance, Lauren, not the debt, not the guilt. This, don't let Caroline's blindness steal it from you. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ache in my chest loosen. I wasn't cursed to repeat the cycle. I could break it. I folded the letter back into its envelope, sliding it carefully into my bag. It felt like carrying a torch in the dark, a guide I hadn't known I was missing. When I left Ruth's house that afternoon, the air felt lighter. The sun broke through the clouds, casting everything in sharp relief. The sin wave of my life ticked upward again, not in a surge of defiance, but in the steady lift of clarity. The pattern was real, but it wasn't mine to keep. Ava showed up at my apartment 2 nights after Dad was discharged from the hospital. She stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, her makeup smudged, hair pulled into a messy bun, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice wavering. I nodded and stepped aside. She slipped off her heels and sank onto the couch, curling her legs under her like she was trying to disappear. For a while we sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. Finally, she spoke. "You were right," she whispered, "about the loans, about everything. I checked the memos. It was your money, all of it." I waited, letting the words hang. She twisted her hands together. "I feel sick. Like my whole life's been built on lies I didn't even know were there. Ethan, he kept saying you'd keep helping, that family obligations never stop. But when I asked him what we'd do without your money, he just shrugged. He said we'd figure it out, by which he meant you'd figure it out." Her voice cracked. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be the person who drains you. For the first time, I reached out and took her hand. Ava, listen to me. I won't be your bank account anymore, but I will be your sister. If you're willing to stand on your own feet, I'll walk beside you, not carry you. She looked at me, tears glinting in her eyes. I want that. I really do. The next morning she made a choice that surprised me. She broke off her engagement to Ethan. She packed her things from his apartment and called a friend to help her move into a modest rental on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, peeling wallpaper, a squeaky floorboard in the kitchen, but it was hers. Within a week, Ava had applied for a new job at a local marketing agency. It wasn't flashy, but it was steady. When she called to tell me she'd gotten it, her voice was a mix of fear and pride. It's not much, but it's mine. And I'll start paying down what I owe from my own paycheck this time. Hearing those words was like breathing fresh air after years in a closed room. Twist 8, unexpected but real. Ava choosing independence over illusion. That night, I sat at my desk with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I began to write a letter, not one filled with anger, but with boundaries. Mom, Dad, I wrote, I will not be disputing the money I contributed. I know what I gave and I release it. Consider it closed. But I will no longer send another dollar to cover your expenses. If the house is too much, sell it, downsize. Find a way that fits your budget. I am not your insurance policy. I am your daughter. I love you, but love is not measured in checks. It is measured in respect, and that respect must flow both ways. I read it over twice before folding it neatly and sealing it in an envelope. The next morning, I slipped it into the mailbox. As the metal door clanged shut, I felt something inside me settle. The line was drawn, permanent and clear. That evening, Ava stopped by with takeout containers balanced in her arms. We ate cross-legged on my living room floor, cartons of lo mein spread out between us. She raised a plastic cup of soda. To new starts, she said. I clinked my cup against hers. To standing on our own 2 feet. For the first time, I felt the rhythm of my life rising not in spikes and crashes, but in something steadier. The sin curve lifted, holding its line. I had been the invisible daughter, the scaffolding no one saw. Now I was simply Lauren, sister, nurse, woman with boundaries, and that was enough. The city smelled different, not of childhood kitchens or hospital corridors, but of promise, of coffee shops opening at dawn, of rain on sidewalks that gleamed like silver threads under street lamps. My new apartment was small, just 2 rooms and a balcony that barely fit 3 flower pots, but it was mine. I unpacked slowly, each box a declaration of independence. A plant by the window, a stack of books on the shelf, a framed copy of my nurse practitioner acceptance letter. Symbols of a life I had chosen, not one pressed onto me. My first day at the teaching hospital felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. Colleagues greeted me with genuine respect, asking for my opinion, listening when I spoke. The title nurse practitioner carried weight, but it wasn't just the letters after my name. It was the recognition that I belonged, not as a shadow or a backup, but as a professional with skill and authority. One evening after a long shift, I joined a running group that looped around the riverfront. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the laughter of strangers beside me made me feel part of something larger. We stopped after 3 miles, bent over and breathless, and someone handed me a bottle of water. "Welcome to the team," they said, and I realised it was the first time in years I'd felt included without needing to earn it. My apartment slowly filled with life. I planted basil and rosemary in little terracotta pots, watering them after work, watching green shoots push through the soil. The plants were fragile, but they were growing toward the sun, just like me. I thought often of the letter from my grandmother, the words Aunt Ruth had given me. Respect is worth more than approval. Every leaf that sprouted felt like an answer to that inheritance. Weeks passed, and with them came a peace I hadn't thought possible. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. My chest tightened before I even opened it. We're figuring things out. That was all it said. No demands, no guilt, no sermons about sacrifice. Just 4 words. I stared at them for a long time. Later, I learned the truth through Ruth. My parents had sold the big house, the one I'd spent years paying for without credit. They moved into a modest townhouse, small but manageable. For the first time, they were covering their own bills. No foreclosure, no collapse, just adjustment. It was a twist I hadn't expected, not the crash I had braced for, somehow stripped of my support. They had found their own footing, and I realised something. I had not abandoned them. I had forced them to stand. Caroline never apologised outright. But that short message was her version of an olive branch. We're figuring things out. It wasn't love, it wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. At work, a colleague named Hannah invited me to join her for dinner with a group of nurses. They shared stories over pasta and wine, laughing at mistakes and celebrating victories. Someone toasted me that night to Lauren, who saved 2 patients last week with her quick judgment. And the table erupted in applause. I felt warmth bloom in my chest, the kind I used to chase in vain from my own family. I thought of Ava too. She texted me photos of her small apartment, her first paycheck from the marketing agency. One picture showed her cooking pasta in a mismatched pot, another of her pinning a note to her wall. My debt, my responsibility. She was shaky but trying, and that was enough. Sometimes late at night, I still heard echoes of old guilt, the voice that said I had failed them. But then I would water my plants, feel the soil between my fingers, and remember. Growth requires boundaries. Without them, everything withers. The inheritance I carried wasn't money or property. It wasn't even the house I had nearly bankrolled. It was something different, something stronger. The letter from my grandmother, the wisdom of Ruth, the resilience of my own survival, an inheritance of dignity. On a quiet Sunday morning, I laced my running shoes and jogged to the river. The city skyline shimmered against the water, and for the first time, I wasn't haunted by what I had left behind. I was anchored by what I was building. I stopped, catching my breath, and watched the sunrise paint the sky in gold. For once, I didn't think of sin waves or crashes. The line had steadied, lifting me upward into something lasting. I whispered to the breeze, as if to the ghost of my grandmother, I didn't buy my place in this family. I built my place in my own life. And the wind seemed to answer, carrying the promise forward. A week after Mom's short message, another buzz lit up my phone. This time it was from Ava. The text was short, but the photo attached said more than words could. A screenshot of her bank account, a payment confirmation circled in green, student loan payment, $325. Below it her message, first one made on my own. You gave me the map, but the path is mine. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. My little sister, who had once been shielded from every bill, was stepping onto her own path. The pride in me was unexpected, almost fierce. She wasn't fixed, not yet, but she was moving. I typed back, I'm proud of you. Keep going, one payment at a time. She sent a heart emoji, then nothing more, and that was enough. That night, I Sat by the window with a notebook in my lap, the city lights glowing against the dark. I thought of everything that had unfolded, the dinners, the statements, the storms of guilt. I thought of Dad's near collapse, of Caroline's silence, of Ethan's calculating smirk, now gone from Ava's life. I thought of Jennifer's voice, sharp and grounding. And I thought of my grandmother's letter, the one that had reminded me not to trade self-respect for approval. I wanted to leave something behind, not for them, but for myself. A record of what I had learned, a map in case I ever started to lose my way again. At the top of the page I wrote 3 signs of financial abuse in families. 1. One person funds the lifestyle of others without transparency. Money leaves your account, but no one explains where it goes, and you're told it's for the family. 2. Boundaries are treated as betrayal. Any attempt to pause or stop payments is met with guilt, shame, or threats of collapse. 3. Your worth is measured by what you provide, not who you are. Love and respect are conditional, based on your financial contributions, not your humanity. I paused, then turned the page. 3 boundaries that saved me. 1. I can help with information, not with money. 2. My budget is not a family emergency plan. 3. I won't finance choices I didn't make. I read them aloud in the quiet, letting the words echo. They weren't just sentences anymore. They were shields. They were the scaffolding I had needed long before I realized it. The catharsis wasn't loud. It didn't come in shouts or slammed doors. It came in stillness, in knowing the storm had passed and I was still standing. Stronger, clearer, carrying a different inheritance than the one my parents had tried to hand me. A knock on the door startled me. It was my neighbour from across the hall, a young mother I had chatted with in the laundry room. She smiled shyly, holding out a plate of cookies. "Just a thank you," she said, "for helping when my son fell the other day. You didn't have to, but you did." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. "Of course, that's what neighbours do." After she left, I set the cookies on the counter and leaned against the sink, letting the moment sink in. This was family too, connections chosen, not demanded. Love offered freely, not extracted. I thought of all the years I had tried to buy, my place at my parents' table, paying for silence, for scraps of approval that never came. And I realized I had never abandoned my family. I had abandoned the lie. I picked up my pen and wrote the final line at the bottom of the page, underlining it twice. I didn't abandon my family. I abandoned the lie that I had to buy my place in it. The words sat there, solid and unshakable. I closed the notebook, set it on the shelf, and turned off the lamp. The plants by the window rustled softly in the night breeze. The city outside hummed, alive and vast. And I knew this was the inheritance I would carry forward. Not debt, not silence, not guilt, but strength, clarity, and the choice. To build a life where my worth was never for sale again. The sin wave of my story had steadied, its line lifting into calm. For the first time, I wasn't holding my breath for the next crash. I was breathing freely, finally, in a life of my own making.